everyone. Welcome to an awesome day of FileMaker Training. I'm Richard Carlton here. Welcome to fmtraining.tv, where every day we're doing lots of fun FileMaker things and we're learning about the FileMaker platform. This broadcast has been sponsored by fmtraining.tv, the most awesome location for FileMaker training on the planet. Visit fmtraining.tv, click the link. If you hit that link right there, it auto default to that. You can see today we're doing FileMaker Server for beginners. Fine, then tomorrow is FileMaker Server for beginners, but then it rapidly becomes not beginnery, right? In fact, a little bit of today is going to be not beginnery. So this is our website right here. It tells us how awesome we all are. Well, all of you mostly watch free training. If you want to support the channel, we greatly appreciate you spending a couple dollars with us. If you go to fmtraining.tv and purchase either the basic bundle, the plus bundle, or the complete bundle. This is basic love, and this is love plus hugs, and this is complete life satisfaction with you, everyone that you know. You'll be completely happy at all times if you buy that complete bundle right there. So just to let you know, that's how you should expect to feel after purchasing our products. Today is going to be talking about FileMaker Server, and it was funny because I could cover this a lot of different ways. So yesterday, so that we're going to recap what we discussed yesterday. So yesterday was about how do you share a solution with people who tell you that you are awesome, like David Angel, you're so amazing. Oh, I love you, David Angel. That solution is so amazing. Can we share the solution that you built with the rest of the people in the company? And David goes, yeah, I am so awesome. That's not a problem at all. I'm going to do blah, blah, blah with the file. So yesterday we discussed the idea of what is peer-to-peer sharing and why it's not ideal. Then what is FileMaker Server and what is FileMaker Cloud and the differences and the pricing in there, and trying to decrypt and decipher the Claris website, right? Claris being the company and the people. And once again, Claris is really a subsidiary of Apple. They all wear Apple badges, which really at the end of the day, they're Apple, right? They call themselves Claris, but they're Apple people pretending to be someone else. So administering FileMaker Server. Today is about FileMaker Server for beginners. So let me just drive in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into, let me see, let's remote into it. So I'm going to hit Command K. I'm going to go to DBW02. This is a database server that I control and I have access to. I'm going to remote into this. You folks can see this, and I have to put my password in here, and it logs in. Now, this is a FileMaker server at this point. However, your FileMaker server can be Mac, Windows, or Linux. As a general rule, you're on the Mac, it'll be the current operating system and one operating system back. On Windows, Jacob, people always like to say, can I run FileMaker Server on my home edition of Windows? What can we do there?
So current support is basically like the current server release, which in this case is Windows Server 2022, and then one back, same thing, Windows Server 2019. The specific versions that you need for that are the data center, the standard edition, something like that. One of the more like full fat versions of the software. There are some like micro, they're cheaper, they have less features and stuff versions of Windows. Avoid those, short version.
This is the administrative console to the FileMaker server. I could access this administrative console anywhere on the internet. Now, in the case of what we're doing, we're using something we've never talked about. We're just going to have to do it. It's kind of a virtual private network called Zero Tier, okay? This is the web browser interface. Everything with the FileMaker server or FileMaker Cloud works through a very similar interface. This is called Claris FileMaker Server. In the documentation, they don't call it Claris FileMaker Server. They call it Claris Server or FileMaker Server because they're two separate products until they're deforked. So right here is the server administration. So this is my personal server, and we're just going to look at this briefly here, and then we're going to go through understanding bits and pieces of it. But what I tell all the engineers at RCC, especially the senior engineers, intermediate senior engineers, I want them to be professionals. I want them to know how the products work. They should each have their own FileMaker server. Even if it's ratty on an old machine and it barely works and it hobbles around, because they use it, then they're knowledgeable. It's like going to some auto mechanic and you tell them, hey, this car makes all sorts of noises and it doesn't go in reverse. And the guy says, well, I only work on doors. Where it's a mechanic. No, I only do doors. Does the door make noise? No, the door's closed just fine. Okay, well then go see someone else. So I want the people that work for me to be able to be knowledgeable on all the pieces of the product And so I have them run their own FileMaker server. So this is me leading by example. So in here, this is the interface. I can probably, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger here so you can see that. Dashboard, the main tab shows you the percent availability. This is a Mac Mini with a solid state drive. The drive's a little full. I don't like anything much above about 60%. And so I'm trying to decide if I want to like put this thing on a serious diet or if I want to get a new Mac Mini for this thing because it's got a 256 gig drive. And you think that's enough, but I hoard documents, especially aviation documents, especially about helicopters and things like that. And I keep all the PDFs and things like that, images, videos. And so I have this 40 gig repository of knowledge that I use for my training. So anyway, so this is the overview. This is the volume status. This is the CPU usage. It's spiked right here because we're doing screen sharing. And so space remaining 61 gigs, blah, blah, blah. And then it shows you the number of FileMaker Pros that are connected, the FileMaker Go's connected, web directs, and other stuff. Additional is other stuff, okay? Databases. These are the live databases that are running right here. Okay, so if I click on one, you can see the people who are connected over here. Once again, this is, if you go to one of our corporate databases or one of the client databases, you could have 20, 30, 50, 100 people in here. This is my personal database. So it'll only have 2 or 3 people, all me, but just different computers, right? And if I look over here, you will see a little, let me see if I can zoom in on this a little bit. Here we go. There we go. That's Dumbo big. Okay, look over here. So fire marshal is the fire marshal. Notice a little icon. So P, this play button means it's currently playing. Okay. This means it's currently not encrypted. We're going to discuss that. This is the name of the file. These are the clients. If I come up here, I click on this one. It over here it shows who's connected to it. That kind of information there. Over here it says I can pause the file, which is interesting. Close the file. Download a copy, remove it, verify, clear encryption password, which is kind of a funky one. So the short version is that these are not encrypted. You're like, Richard, they're not encrypted. Someone could steal these. No. This is the encryption. So say that our favorite fire marshal, Ed, runs an illegal chicken cockfighting ring out of the fire department, out of the fire marshal fire department. And he's loading the data into the fire marshal database. And then the FBI decides to descend upon us and to get the file to see which cocks are winning the fights and how much money was being bet, right? It's chicken fighting, basically, which is kind of this weird sport that I never understood, but apparently it's a thing and it's mostly illegal. So if the FBI came in here and they went to the server, they shut the server down, they put an FBI thumb drive in there, copied the fire marshal file onto it, they could take it back and eventually break into it. If it's encrypted, then the FBI would need help of the NSA or some other agency, the government or some big time supercomputer to break into the file because the file is encrypted. Do I have that correct, Jacob?
Yep. There's some things that they could do in advance of that that are very modern. You might actually steal the server while it's running, because then you could try and read the keys out of its memory. But that's
steal the server while it's running. I don't. Okay, well maybe there's some FBI guys that are that smart. But
it's a thing. I don't know if they'd be successful.
I don't know. Yeah, that's.
I don't know if Claris has done anything to thwart things like that, et cetera, et cetera. But
yeah, that's really high-end thievery. Anyway, so the idea is that they get the file, they can't break into it because it's literally super duper duper encrypted. But you should assume that if the U.S. government really want to get into it, they can get into it. That is where your files are hanging out here. Those are the databases. I can close all. These are the let's cover the common things. Close all, right? Open all. Pause is funky. How is you? The fact that pause is in here is interesting. Would you like to explain what pause is, Jacob Taylor?
Can
you want to attempt that?
Do I have a good explanation of what pause in the database is?
What pause is that it's not accessible to users. However, if someone's logged in, they get the coffee cup on it, right? Then you can run a backup on it or do something like that. Then you can resume it. So pausing it means that it's kind of safe to copy it, but no one's been kicked out of it. I believe this is the correct statement on this. Normally, if I was going to copy it or do something or whatever, I would close it. I have never used pause all. Pause all would be what you'd want to do if you were going to snapshot the server and you wanted to properly remember. If a FileMaker file is open, you cannot just copy it. It's the same as crashing it because it wasn't closed down before it was copied, right? We understand that? I mean, I'm hoping I'm being clear on this a little bit. I mean, maybe not as clear as I should be. So when you run a backup, a FileMaker server runs a backup, notice that people don't get kicked out. In fact, ideally, most people don't even know that it's been backed up. What happens with the backup is that it pauses the database itself, it writes a copy of it, then it resumes it automatically. That's what a backup is. This is a pause that you're manually telling the server to do, and it will be paused in perpetuity forever until you tell it to resume. So this is that manual process, okay? Makes sense? Backups, let's talk about backups over here. These are where the backups are. What I wanna do is pivot to the documentation on this a little bit, but the short version, this is a server, these are databases, these are the backups, and this right here is a bunch of configuration stuff. This right here is other configuration stuff. They call it administration, but they're both settings, right? Settings. Over here are logs, kind of if they're turned on, right? Kind of thing, right? Makes sense? So let's talk about the documentation real quick because this brings up an interesting point. So if you come over here to introduction over here, or here's the FileMaker server. Here we go. When I said the other day, FileMaker server, correction, Claris server, FileMaker server, two different products. They are essentially nearly identical products. This is back that conversation we talked about forking. They fork stuff, and then having two nearly identical products that had different price points and capabilities. Claris server, which is going away, FileMaker server will continue to be there. It's the one we always use. So FileMaker server, so these instructions are basically identical for both. And if you come down here, you have this thing about administering FileMaker server. So you have starting up FileMaker server. Once again, we're not talking so much about installation of FileMaker server. We've covered that before. How to install it. It's not a beginner activity, okay? However, uploading your files and basic administering is applicable and appropriate, right? So if I go back to over here, the administering of coming to this screen and seeing this right, databases and seeing this, that's fair game. And looking at the backups is fair game. That's kind of the extent of what I would expect beginners to do. So we're going to focus on these. And then Jacob is going to color in around the edges as I kind of get to some awkward, sharp edges, shall we say. So I'm going to put this back over here. So let's talk about this. So there's installing FileMaker server, command line, this, that, the other thing. I'm not going to get deep into the weeds on this stuff. Configuring the FileMaker server or configuring the admin console, right? We got that. Changing user credentials, etc. Uploading a database. So yesterday we talked about uploading a database. We can, if you have a FileMaker file that is open, like contacts or something or whatever, here it goes. It's giving me grief. And I want to upload the file. Here it is here. Hit share. You can say upload to host, okay? Upload to host. Once again, we discussed what the word host is. Host is a server. A server is something that publishes something on the internet for you, okay? Web server publishes web pages. Email server publishes emails and receives emails. Share with other FileMaker clients is the peer-to-peer. We don't recommend it. I would expect, I didn't say this yesterday, I would expect that option to be absolutely removed from the product whenever someday they make the free peer-to-peer version, or the free version of Pro, right? Like right now, this is FileMaker Pro. You have to pay for this and buy it. Someday they want to make this as like a freemium download that you can get, which would be epically awesome to help get the word out about FileMaker. If they do that, the peer-to-peer sharing is going to be gone. So you can upload to the host here, or you can close the file, find a way of moving the file from here to the server, and then going on to the FileMaker server over here, and you go to databases, and you see a file that looks like, it would look like, I'm just going to close this one here real quick. I'm going to say close. It would look like this. You'd be up here and you'd have one with a little gray. I got the little gray thingy right here. It's not running. It's closed. That one's open. That one's closed. None of them have the encryption password on them. Okay. So then you'd say, oh, you've uploaded it. Then you want to say open. Now, pretty cookie cutter straightforward. Let's talk about backing it up, Jacob, first at a beginner level, right? And then we can dive into stuff where there's sharp edges here, right? So the backups, when you install FileMaker server, it automatically auto installs like one backup a day at midnight for like 5 days or something like that. Kind of strange.
7. Yep.
Is it 7 or is it
It's
5?
7. It's
Is
7.
it, okay, so once
It's
upon a
a
time, I
it's a
think that was 5.
keep 1-7 schedule.
Yeah.
Basically.
So let's talk about we haven't really covered the beginning of for beginners the backups idea. So FileMaker Server, actually I'm going to do this, and it looks identical on Windows. And if you could actually see Linux, then Jacob could probably show you that it looks nearly identical there as well.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say backup. So it has auto backup on demand. On-demand backups are create on-demand backup at any time, scheduled. These are the ones that you schedule, right? Then you have these progressive ones. So in here, you're going to see auto backup and on demand. So auto backup, it's funny, it's not listed here, okay? But it is. The auto backup is that, Jacob, that's the 1.7 one, right? Yeah, for the most part. And for whatever reason, I only have 3 on here because I must have got rid of some or something. I have no idea. Okay. When you set up backup schedules, like the classic, like I want it every hour at the top of the hour, or I say I want it every hour, 6 minutes after the hour, right? Something like that. So when I set the backup schedule, I set up, this is me personally, I don't want to lose data. I have a external hard drive called hourly, or I have SSDA. I do an hourly and a daily on that solid state drive. And then I have another solid state drive called B. And then I have this, I think I have like 4 drives here. And I'm not using them in a RAID array. People say, I want to use RAID because it'll be faster and more reliable. Most people who use RAID, seriously, most people who use RAID and they're not permanent IT enterprise people, they have no idea how to actually use it, and it almost never works the way they think it will. When a drive dies, it mostly takes out their stuff. I say that, I ask how many of you have had a drive fail and have had it respond appropriately and positively when it failed, kind of thing, right? It's very few people. So RAID is not the great idea, just as a general rule, unless that's all you do all time is do big server hardware, okay? So you have 4 different drives for me, and they're solid state, so they're pretty fast. You could even use the NVMe drives, right, Jacob Taylor, right? Fast drives that are super lickety split. And then you write a complete copy to each drive. So if that drive blows up, which is much more rare with solid state drives, if the drive fails, then you have 3 other drives where the data's at, right? And that's the strategy. And then if you're really crazy about it, then you can do an offsite backup, things like that. So here's the drives. This one runs at 5 after the hour. This one runs 20 after the hour. This runs 40 after the hour. That's a weekly one. This one runs 10 after the hour, 25, 30, top of the hour, 35. None of these run at the same time. They're all kind of staggered, because what happens if you run them at the same time, then the system will go, hey, I'm only going to run one at a time here, and the other ones are going to back up. And if you're trying to do a bunch of database edits on some table at 5 after the hour, you want it to be done and quick, and so it comes back so you don't have to wait. But if you have all the backups kind of locked in, your database might be really slow for 5 minutes for the hour or 10 minutes for the hour or something, right? So you want to avoid that. So I stagger these out. They're on different drives. The drives are conveniently enough hiding over here on the side out of the way. This is old school basic stuff, but it's once again my personal server. Now, everything that I've done here, Jacob Taylor will do some variation of this, and we'll talk about the backups more in kind of an elaborate conversation on Friday. In fact, Jacob, when we start on Friday, we need to start with hard linking and discuss that conversation, what that is, because that's not even discussed very well in here at all, unless we want to get into that. But
it's in their documentation somewhere. But
I read it. No, I read it earlier today, and it gets into here. It's not, and it talks about it, and it's like,
and they address REFS.
Yeah, but they don't explain what it is and how great it is and how wonderful it is. Useful. And so once again, part of my job is just to kind of read and translate the instructions a little bit. So as a beginner, you should assure either you set this up or your IT person set this up. These are all enabled, by the way. The checkbox, or you check it, and that allows you to delete a duplicate or run it now or do something, right? Like I could click this one and say run now, and it's going to run. It says it's running, and then after a little bit, it's going to go ding, and it'll be done, right? Makes sense? So questions right now from anyone?
I don't really see any questions or commentary at the moment from people. So
Mikey said he had a RAID drive fail that was hot, pluggable, and HP an HP sent a replacement in one day and removed the failed one and placed in a new drive. So the HP people did this, or you did it specifically, Mikey? And if you did it specifically, what is your background and what do you do all day, every day? Because I've never met a programmer / power user who could administer RAID effectively. You calling HP and having them deal with it is great. That's awesome, but you're not HP, right? So, and I'm not complaining. I'm just saying it's really unusual for that to happen. All right, so Mikey did it all himself. Congratulations, Mikey. That's awesome. Yeah. So Mikey had some enterprise grade hardware, and Mikey did it all himself. That is awesome. Most of the time with RAID, because here's the problem with RAID. RAID, like if you have 2 or 3 drives and they're all like redundant, what happens is if a drive fails, then that system runs slower until you put a new drive in. You put the new drive in, it's supposed to do this auto recover stuff. And if it works correctly, then it kind of rebuilds that drive. So it's like every time a bit of data is saved across like 3 or 4 drives, it takes 1 bit of data and saves it in at least 2 spots, right? So it's not like the most efficient high-speed thing, but it's kind of more redundant. The idea is that one drive can fail, you pull it out, everything's still running, hot pluggable. Everything customers and people are still using, put the new drive in, and then in between servicing customers, it's rebuilding taking the data that was lost on the one drive that died and writing it onto the new empty drive. And then when it's done, the new empty drive is not empty. It's a fully fledged part of that RAID array. That's the idea behind that, right? So anyway, so my thing is, unless you're like a serious enterprise IT person, stay away from RAID, okay? Now, if you can have it abstracted like at Amazon, then that's totally appropriate, right? And so there is a question, Mikey says, yeah, must have be configured very precisely. If your day job is programming or doing other stuff in the world of FileMaker, you probably don't do enough RAID stuff to effectively manage it or know enough about it. Like if you are an enterprise person, you probably should set up a RAID system at least once every 3 or 4 weeks, right? Would be my guess. That way it's current, it's fresh. In aviation, it's called currency. Are you current? Can you do it? Right? If you do it once a year, that's not current. That's just enough to get you and everyone killed if something goes wrong. All right, so someone asked a question, can EAR make a FileMaker? So we're going to talk, I guess we should pivot to encryption at rest a little bit. Jacob Taylor, are you there? Is Jacob still? Jacob, why don't you, and this gives me a chance to have a drink, why don't you try to explain what is EAR and why do we care about it? And it's these little check boxes here, and cover the downsides of this as best you can, if that makes sense.
Losing the password is the downside, but we'll get into that. So EAR, that's kind of our invented, not term, but acronym.
No, that's actually everywhere. Claris's? It's everywhere except in the documentation that marketing wrote.
So EAR, acronym standing for encryption at rest. And that kind of describes it. If you don't know what encryption is, this will be a difficult conversation. But very essentially, you understand FileMaker at a basic level. You have a database that has records and scripts and layouts and all of this sort of stuff. So that's stored in a physical file on the server. You can encrypt those. That scrambles it. And back to the previous conversation, scrambles it in a way where unless the NSA gets your password for that file, nobody's going to be getting into it. That's a very high level of protection. It is often something that's applied to the database. For example, many businesses, and I use this as a blanket term, but businesses in interesting industries, if you are one of those, you know who you are. You may have regulatory requirements about encrypting data being stored, or things like that, or operational concerns. You don't want, in the case of a server breach, you don't want whoever breaches it to be able to actually get the data out. So you're going to be encrypting the databases in that case as well. But just generally speaking, it is an additional level of protection on the actual FileMaker records stored on the FileMaker server themselves. And this does a couple of things. It means that if, for example, someone I'll say like steals the server, that can mean kind of different things. If you're on site, that may be a literal statement. You could pick up run off with it. They won't have access to any of the data. It's encrypted. That's awesome. Similar thing, if you were grabbing data from somewhere, whatever, you breach a backup system. That's a common one. You get into people's backups and try and, grab a copy. Right, you don't need the live data. I'm going to go over here and figure out what they got. It's cool. It's interesting, I'm sure. If those databases are encrypted, they're not going to see anything. They may, if they have the password, if they, are able to breach both sides of that, right? They can get the encrypted database and the password itself. All right, you have a problem. But if they only get one, the database in this case would be the least risky of the two. They're not going to be able to read the data. That includes in the backups, they're stored encrypted. They're wherever you're going to copy and paste them to, some kind of offsite backup system, Dropbox, whatever. It doesn't matter. Those stored copies of the file are also encrypted and thus breach protected. Now, to address what Richard is about to ask, which is the downsides of this, the big one is for the same reason. If you lose the password for the file, this encryption key, you lose your business potentially.
All right, so let me help with this here. Where's this at? So, hello everyone, this is the internet. What is the biggest risk to your databases if you're using EAR? Okay, and this is a list of all of you on the internet over here. I don't know if you can see that. David, Foxy Jack, you see your name there? You are the biggest risk. You are the biggest risk. We know this because I anticipated this, and then we found out the hard way. People will set up EAR. They write it down on a Post-it note if we're lucky, or they say, oh, I'll always remember this. And then 2 years later, we're trying to figure out what they were thinking at the time. And there's no recovery for this. And so if you're a serious organization and you have F-35 stealth fighter secrets, then you should have a very serious security policy where passwords go. But if you're Juan and Mathilda's flower shop, right? Bad juju, okay? Because Jake and Taylor and I went through hell when Claris decided to get rid of one old version of their Claris cloud, and people lost the setup said, because you're on an Apple server, you must use EAR. So if you're using the software as a service, the Claris cloud, you must use EAR. You must write it down. The very first version of that product, 1.0, was you could put the password in, and then nowhere was it ever accessible again. And so when they shut the service down, they said, hey, you're gonna get these files off here. You get the files off because we're shutting down the server forever and forever and forever. And they shut the server down. People didn't have the password. And we spent months and hundreds of hours trying to discuss with customers their favorite car, their dog's favorite name, their favorite kind of jewelry. We had someone diamond this and diamond that. Diamond 55 Bravo 4 exclamation point was their password. And if they didn't get it, they were gone, out of business, right? Jacob Taylor?
Yep.
Is that?
Yeah, we worked through, I know at least one customer lost their password, and then I'll say over months was able to basically guess it again, frankly, through like rotating through every single password.
Lucky.
Yeah.
Very.
The other customer, and it is the one I'm thinking of and the one Richard's talking about, and we did a live stream on it. That's the Star Trek transporter. If you go Google up that video or look at it on our website in PSA, we had to reconstruct their file. They never got the password. So we were very lucky in basically having a very narrow window of time at that specific moment where we could do a thing and put their database back together for them. That window's passed. We may get that again. We'll see. It's a feature that Claris is working on. But they also were basically lucky. It did not actually give them a like perfect reproduction of their file because that literally that part of the technology is not done yet. We reconstructed it from scratch. It had weird problems, but it functioned and they got to keep their data. So
on the old server, this is the great story, and this is why you want to hang out with smart people like Jacob. Not me, I'm pretty dumb, but Jacob's really smart. Other people work for me are pretty smart. I'm not very bright, but it was funny because the files on the Claris Cloud 1.0, they encrypted it. 3 or 4 or 5 years later, Claris says, we're going to finally deprecate this old stuff. You need to move it. We could get a copy of the file off, but we couldn't open it locally on the password. The FileMaker, the server that Claris had the password on it, but it was encrypted in such a way on the server that Claris either wouldn't give it to us or couldn't give it to us. So the server could open the file, had the password. The server itself would open it. And that's an important part about this, is that if you have a FileMaker server, you put the password in, the server opens, decrypts the file, and then shares it with people. No one out there else has to put the password in, because the FileMaker server has unencrypted it and is now publishing it, hosting it, putting it out wherever it needs to go. So we could get into the file even at an administrative level remotely, but we couldn't get the file locally. So we jury rigged. Remember we talked about that save as XML, right?
Mhm.
The Star Trek transporter. Jacob just mentioned this. And what did we say about the Star Trek transporter? A, it came out in FileMaker 17. B, the engineers at Claris never finished it, and they want to finish it, but that's the stuff that would allow you to modularize FileMaker and share bits of code. And I borrowed part of Todd Guy's code, and he gave me something. And then I bought something from WinDecor, and then I took Starting Point. That's where that goes. That's awesome. That's great. Well, the Star Trek transporter is like some sort of old Star Trek movie where they get on it and they materialize with a missing hand or a missing finger, right? And that's literally what we did. We did the emergency. It's like, get us out of here now. The planet's going to explode. If I lose a finger, I don't give it. I'll be alive. And Jacob literally did that with this file.
Yeah.
And it came off with an ear missing, one eye was gone, and a toe was gone. But he got the data out of it and was able to kind of help the customer with this. That's like a real sketch moment. I mean,
they had a business afterwards. That's like, the alternative is if we weren't able to do that, that was the end of that business, at least for that data set. Kind of the obvious tax problems that not having any of that documentation might cause, like really bad and ugly outcome.
Really bad. I mean, I guess you could also run an export. We also said, well, you could export all your data since you're as an administrator, just dump all your data. And people go, well, you could dump the data out. Yeah, you know what a database engine looks like in its raw form? It's a spreadsheet, right? That's it. A really ugly moment. So I think the takeaway is that take ear seriously. It's not trivial, and it will burn you to the ground if you don't treat it with the respect it requires.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, we weren't sure if it would work. Like that's why it's like, I don't know, maybe there's going to be a hand missing. That's a really good outcome in this case. No, like, are you enjoying that outcome? No, no, but you have a business afterwards, and that is a huge improvement over not. So, that's why we tell that story. It isn't like to scare anybody. It's just like Richard said, you have to pay it the necessary amount of respect, because the downside, the problem, it's great. It's a huge upside. It's a massive level of protection for the data that represents the business, or that represents what the business has done, like your documentation of that, all that stuff. Love it. It's great. If you lose the password, do not.
Yeah, and that's the thing, because it's our normal tendency is just to do it real quick and and then not write it down. So I've lost 2 or 3 passwords since they came out with it. Me personally, I don't like to admit to it, but then I realize that me admitting to my own faults somehow
I remember that
you.
one. We had to go back and I remember digging for backups. That was like, it was one of those things where it's like, it wasn't even the wrong thing necessarily to encrypt the particular database in question, but we didn't handle the password again with the amount of respect necessary, and so it was probably recorded somewhere, but not where it needed to be, and so it was in some sense lost. And so
I did that. It was my fault. I'm
right,
a bad person.
and Richard wanted to do something new with that file, basically a duplicate, make a new one, start a new project based on that sort of thing. Wonderful. But then it was like, oh, the file's encrypted. Wait, where's the password? And we looked, couldn't find it. And so then it's like, all right, well, we were unable to locate it after an amount of time that we were like, all right, we have to give up on that pursuit of the password. And so it's like, all right, go back and start digging in backups to try and find a copy that was pre-encryption, basically.
It was a backup before we put the ear, because remember, once you put ear on, as it writes backups, the ear is on the backups, right? That's actually a test question on the certification if Claris ever updates their test. But anyway, that's a great question. This is an excellent question. If you apply an EAR password to your FileMaker server or your FileMaker server, will the backups be protected? They are protected from all the ones that are written at the point that EAR is applied. So we were looking for an old backup, like we keep like a lot of times on the FileMaker server, I'll keep one a week for 52 weeks or 99 weeks. That's almost 2 years of backups. And I was looking for one that was way back before I turned that on. Please, 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 is it there? So anyway, so
one.
yeah. So let's talk about Jacob, and I don't know, you probably don't want to share your screen, but at least we need to discuss it somehow. So as a basic beginning user, 1, treat EAR respectfully, and if you don't feel like respecting it, just don't use it. 2, you can upload files. We've demonstrated that, okay? We could also show putting EAR on, but we kind of talked about that with the database tools the other day. But how do I put EAR on a file? Well, you go to FileMaker, and then you go to Win Tools, right? Remember the super duper, I think Calvin was in here. We were talking about descriptive bugger. It was a Calvin conversation. You come down here to database utilities, and then you add the file here, and then you check on the option to encrypt it. So if I say add the Blay one, whatever file that is, and I hit this option right here, enable EAR. And so then you have to put your FileMaker account in the normal admin account, and then you put your EAR password. This is how you apply it. And then you run that process, it gives birth to it, then you move that file to the server. That's how it works right now. That's how it's worked for a long time. That's how you apply it. Now, so the common things that developers do is they need to download a copy of the file. Okay, so let's talk about like common things. So I'm on this file and I want the value calc, the 206 value calc. I never finished it, but it's pretty neat. It would calculate the value of this model of helicopter if you put stuff in. And I'm going to say, I want to download it. Oh, I can't download it. Maybe let me just try this. I'm going to pause it first. It's paused. Can I download it? No. Okay, so to download it, I have to actually close it fully.
Mm-hmm.
And the red, so you saw it was red there. It was doing the shutdown. Okay, then it closed. Now I can download a copy. Download. It's download to wherever the browser's at. The browser's on the computer. It went to the desktop of this other computer, right? Wherever that would be.
Check your bell.
Here we go. Ah, there it is. Notifications. So what it does, it zips it on the server, it hides it on the FileMaker server. Then you just click this, and then here it is right here. So this would be wherever your browser is that you're logged into the server, right? Yes. Jacobs is here writing herd on me. By the way, notice when it downloaded it, it brought over the remote containers or the containers with remote storage. All right, so that's that. So we got the file down. Now, let's pretend that this happened to me the other day. I'm working on the new version of Starting Point Lite. I get in there, I find all the Nix scripts that are just badly named. They're improperly placed. They're horrible. I select all and hit delete. And then I open the file up and I'm getting error after error after error. And I realized that I should have run a database design report, put it in base elements, then determine which scripts weren't being called at all and delete those scripts, not just every one that I hated the name of. So then I said, I have the emergency red phone right here. Mr. Taylor, this is Richard. I'm very sorry to report. Can you restore the backup for me? Yes, I am stupid. No, I deleted. Yes, I admit I am stupid. Thank you. All right. That's the conversation that actually happened. Truth, all truth. Mr. Taylor, how do we download?
I zipped it and fired it over.
Yeah, I know. So would you like to tell me, how do we restore a backup? Like this one here is bad, or maybe we care about, we don't want to get rid of it, but we want the one that was backed up an hour ago. How do we do that? And can a beginner do that? Can a beginner do this?
Not via the web console. No. That's the actual answer. You cannot do what we're looking at. Because it has not been built into the product.
But it is built in other places.
Mm-hmm.
So they just haven't put it in.
For those of you who are amazingly familiar with Claris Cloud, the new one basically, they have, and we talked a little bit about this yesterday, they have a fairly in one way insane and in one way awesome backup system, which is 20-minute backups for like 30 days, which is an awesome amount of backups. I enjoy it. as someone who has to deal with database restoration and stuff like that. So if you go onto Claris Cloud, which we can't show here actually, they have an option where you can go and find any of those backups that were taken over the last 30 days, and you can take that old copy of your database and make it live. And it doesn't like overwrite the existing one. You know, it's not like that. You can't like pick an old one and be like, make this live now, and it just replaces everything for you.
You go to backups, and I think you click on it and you say resuscitate it or whatever you call it.
Yeah, there's like a button for it basically. But it takes that old copy, it makes it live, it puts like the timestamp in the file name or whatever, so that you know, oh, it's an old, you know, I'm looking at a backup basically. Yeah, it'd be like 206B value calculator, you know, 2023 October 25, blah blah blah. You know,
some timestamp, yeah.
Yep. And so then it's live. And that is, it's not quite, you know, the awesome thing would be to be able to go and pick and say, all right, the 25th, the 4 p.m. backup, this file, you know, no, we're throwing everything away. We want this one live now. It would be amazing if you could do that. If I could, you know, if there's like a permission to grant or something like that, where it would be possible for someone to do that from the admin console. But that doesn't exist. So
how do we, so given the fact that Claris Cloud is either kind of too pricey when you have very many users, or it has limitations, so we don't use it. So with FileMaker Server, what is the resurrection or restore? Well, I can show them on my Mac, I guess. We have to do the equivalent, right? So
yep.
Let's do it. So what we do is you come over to this file and you say, this is the one that's been destroyed, okay? So I close it on the browser, then I right-click it. No, I click that. I say remove.
Circles. Yep.
I could download it if I wanted. I could say remove.
Yep.
I hit
okay.
okay.
If you want to download the bum copy for an archive or something like that,
yep,
might be useful.
There it goes. Okay, the screen updated, it removed it, because what it had to get the file, then it had to hunt down all the remote containers, right? Yep. So it dumped a bunch of stuff. So then I come over to my Mac and I go over here and I find database backups SSDA. Now, very important about backups here. If you tell the database system to keep 10 copies of it, here's an old one here. I'm going to get rid of this. That's a zip. This is the way it should look in its normal environment. Jacob, would you like to explain how it works with keeping 10 or 12 copies?
Oh, I don't know what the test answer is, but it rolls them forward basically. So when you backup runs, it's about to be 2. So we'll say the 2 p.m. backup is going to run. Richard's server writes out this 2 p.m. backup, and that actually will probably show up here shortly if we talk long enough.
Yeah.
That gets written out. The oldest one, which I think is actually the one he has selected here.
Yeah.
Which is the 1503. That's 3:05 p.m.
What happens to that? What happens to it?
Goes away.
That's the test question, is where does it go? Does it get named? Does it move to an old folder somewhere else, archive folder?
Deleted.
It goes away. So if you keep 24, it keeps 24 of the most freshest ones. When it gets to number 25, the oldest one drops off, okay? So I'm going to go to the one from 130. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to open up databases, and these are all the files that I have in here. So I have these databases here. I have Marg's databases, whatever those are. RC. This is funny. This caused a funny joke at Claris Engineering because they kept calling Richard Carlton. Back in the day, they thought it was a funny joke. And it's actually remote containers, as in they're remote outside of the FMP12 file. So they're all, unless you do something special, they're all stuffed in here. And so they'll all be in here, and you'll see secure, then they'll all be encrypted in this stuff. So over here, I'm going to go to this real quick. I'm going to say 206B. I'm going to option. You don't just take my word for man without me getting into we'll get into detail tomorrow on this. In fact, that's how tomorrow should start, is why don't you just drag the file out and
do that?
No, you're going to option drag it or cause it to copy. That's a copy. Okay. Yeah. Yes.
Just to be clear, if you do not follow that advice, you will be calling me, and you will be my one person per year that thinks they have completely destroyed their company, which is not wrong based on what they're looking at, by trying to restore to a backup. just don't do it. We will explain all of the technical detail tomorrow. I have no problem with it. It's
We
not
will
an
do it.
intermediate discussion. Just don't do it. That's the short
Okay, so I'm
version.
out. Now, this is the backup. I copied it to the desktop. The desktop is part of the boot drive off of one of the solid-state drives. I'm going to open up, and the Windows, you're going to do the same thing. On Linux, it's all command line hell. And if those of you who like command line, that's awesome. So I go into Library. I go to FileMaker Server, which is this folder. Then you go to Data, and you have all these caches. Then you have databases. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in the FMP12 file in here, because remember I told to remove. I could have also closed it here, then manually removed it. 6 and 1 half dozen other, but this is the part that you have to manually do, is move it from the backup in here. Okay, I moved the file. I did not move the containers. So then the containers go into RC data FMS, and I'm going to put this in here like that. Make sense? Okay.
Yep.
Now, here's the rub. Only on the Mac. Only on the Mac. Only on the Mac. You need to change the permissions, the Unix, Linux level permissions. I'm going to hit Command I for information. Okay, or you could right click it and say Get Info.
Get info. Yep.
Yeah, and then it's going to bring this up, and what you're going to see is read and write for Richard Carlton, because I'm awesome. Read and write for staff. What you should be just, and it always seems to change, and Jacob would tell you what to look for. I'm looking for read and write for something to do with FileMaker and or FileMaker Server. Sometimes it says different things on it. To me, I don't do this about twice a year.
Yeah.
So I don't see it. So I'm going to go add. So then I was looking for either FileMaker or FileMaker Server. I see FileMaker Server user.
That's the one.
I'm going to hit select. It puts it in here. FileMaker Server is read only. The problem is if you don't fix this and you open this file up, it's read only. So you'll say, I restored the file. And then everyone logs in and they say, they start getting these weird reports like, hey, this script reports that it doesn't work, or I can't edit a record, or I can't add a record. You'll get these weird bug reports. It means you didn't fix this. So you have to go here and say read and write. Okay. And then essentially you're done. Now, Jacob, do you have to fix the containers too, or not the containers too?
I do. You can just right click on the 206.
Yeah, you can do the whole folder, right? So you could click on this, say get info.
Do the get info. Same concept. You add this.
Okay.
You add the same user.
Add the same user.
Okay.
But it's a whole bunch of stuff.
Change
So
it.
then you change it here, read and write, and then you have to say, I think you have to, is the sequence unlocked?
But do the little gear. Cancel. Hold on.
Oh, hang on.
Hold. Do the gear. Yep. So you see, so the operation we're trying to do there is apply to enclosed items, because we don't want to do it to one file. We want to do it to all of the container data.
Yep.
All the folders, all the files, everything good to go. If you don't do apply to enclosed items, the only thing that you are editing there is literally this 206B value calculator folder. Not any of its little items that it contains, not any of the other stuff. Just that one little entity. Cool, also annoying. But
okay, so,
do that,
so I changed the one. Now I changed this one. Now I've still, as of this moment, only changed the folder, but I want to do it to everything inside. You say, are you really sure? And you say, okay. Yep. And this
absolutely.
And then this did it pretty quick. Sometimes it might spin and grind, depends how much there is. So that is it. So now I come back over here. And magically it showed up, because the FileMaker Server is always scanning the folder and it says, hey, this is here. So it's closed. I have to say open. Now, and if I say open and there was an EAR password on it, it would say, alert, attention, Jacob Taylor. What's the EAR password? Please put it in. And right about there is when you realize, oh, you don't know where it is or what it is, and you realize you have a problem, okay? Mr. Taylor, anything else? It's 3 minutes after the top of the hour.
No, be safe. Don't lose the password. Make sure you have enough backups.
Don't drink and drive. Pay your taxes. Don't threaten people with firearms. Save your password on a piece of paper.
Pretty good. All good advice. Yeah.
It's all quality advice. All right, anything else tomorrow? So tomorrow we're actually going to, it's funny, we're going to pick this conversation up. Remember I said copy the file. Don't drag it and move it. Super, 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 super important. Okay, we'll talk about why that is tomorrow. Yes, yes? Oh, Media Sandbox. Claire makes money by selling license. If FileMaker Pro free, what might the license arrangement be? Last question for Media Sandbox, if he's still here, she's still here. They're going to charge you for the server, which is kind of what they do now. You buy a 5-pack of server, a 10-pack of server, and in that way, when you share your solution with other people, you're an organization, you're deriving value from the collaboration. And that way, when you get hooked on it like drugs and you start sharing it, then you're going to write a check. Someone's going to write a check. Okay, perfect. All right, there you go. We'll see everyone tomorrow. Jacob Taylor, mostly I'm going to be just running the show. Jacob is going to be explaining this stuff because it's kind of gets a little more technical. Okay, yes, yes?
Yep.
Good job. Got a report of an individual up here who may be a FileMaker license. Well, it's potentially expired. Look at the back of that car right there. Looks like the FileMaker license has expired. Sir, I need you to step out of the vehicle. Sir, step out of the vehicle. Sir!